Hey Dungeon Dudes, this is Imagine Old People here, and today I'm here to share with you something new. Now, I've wanted to do this for a while, but I really enjoy the game called Dungeons & Dragons, and because of that, I would really enjoy if I was able to make some Dungeons & Dragons content, and that is exactly what I will be bringing to you today. Today, I am bringing you a mix of two of my favorite things, Dungeons & Dragons and Fallout. Fallout has always been one of my favorite game series. Bethesda does a great job with most of them. There have been a couple of them that have fallen off in, the more recent years, but still have thriving communities and still have wonderfully designed monsters. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Today I am starting a new series called Encounter of the Week. Now, this will be a sort of weekly thing that I will upload where I will show you an encounter based off of something from fiction that I've adapted into a Dungeons & Dragons monster. Today, I will be presenting you one of my favorite creations that I have made. I've made some homebrew monsters over the years, but honestly, I don't think I'm as proud as any of them as I am with this. Today, I present to you the Deathclaw. The first thing to consider when creating any monster in Dungeons & Dragons is to kind of describe it, what it does, how it acts, and I think I've written a fair description on the character sheet that I created, which of course will be linked in the description below. However, it reads like this. The apex predator of the irradiated wastelands. Be sure that any place you'd be prone to fall victim to radiation poisoning, you will almost certainly find the fearsome Deathclaw. A creature said to be the predator of young dragons. Bones of Deathclaws have been found deep within adult and ancient dragon lairs from greedy Deathclaws hunting the young or eggs of the much larger dragons. It is important to note that in most instances of Deathclaw bones found within the caves of adult dragons, the resident adult dragon will tend to have major gash marks within its hide. The radiation from these lacerations is no doubt the sign that they came face to face with a Deathclaw assailant, and can cause problems for the dragon later in its life. Little is known about the Deathclaw habits, seeing as they exist in places no normal creature should stay for extended periods of time, on top of the Deathclaw being so incredibly strong and good at hunting. With a simple description of the creature out of the way, it is time to move on to the beginnings of the stat block. The first thing you'll see right under the Deathclaw's name is that it is a large monstrosity that is unaligned. The reason that I decided it should be unaligned is because it is nothing more than a predator. It really doesn't have the intellect to do things such as hold grudges or anything like that, but it is smart enough to at least remember scents of people that come with certain features of the Deathclaw that I will describe later. I decided that its armor class should be a 17 based off of the Deathclaw's thick hide. Its hit points are 220 for the average hit points, although you can also do the rolling method where you would roll 10d20 plus 110 HP for a maximum of 310 HP. Its speed is 50 feet, along with a swimming speed of 50 and a climbing of 50, which, yes, I know that means that it can run as fast as it can swim and as fast as it can climb, which is quite crazy. However, I think it only makes sense for the apex predator of the irradiated wastelands. Moving on to the Deathclaw's statistics, I decided that it should have a 24 in strength, an 18 in dexterity, a 24 in constitution, an 8 in intelligence, a 16 in wisdom, and a 6 in charisma. Now, it is no secret why I made its strength and constitution both 24s, because it is inhumanely strong and inhumanely durable, and has an amazing endurance considering how great of a hunter that it is. The reason I made its dexterity so high is because it is also quite nimble, despite it being a lumbering monster. Its intelligence is quite low, however higher than most beasts, as it does have the ability to remember certain things. Its wisdom is a 16 because it is a very perceptive creature. It is a great hunter, on top of being just a naturally wise creature in the ways of hunting and things like that. Its charisma is a 6, as it is nothing more than a hulking beast, and doesn't really have the ability to, you could say, communicate with others. Next up, we have its saving throws, with a plus 12 to strength and constitution saving throw. This creature is certainly resistant to being shoved around and has a very hardy heart and body. It has a plus 14 to acrobatics, plus 17 to athletics, plus 13 to perception, plus 14 to stealth, and plus 13 to survival, which, yes, does mean that it has expertise in any stat that it is proficient in, which does make it quite the efficient hunter. Next up, we move on to its damage resistances, which include bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Obviously, seeing it as it has such a hard hide, it would obviously be resistant to things of that nature. It is also immune to acid and poison, as growing up in an irradiated wasteland means that it definitely grew up around things like acid and poison, and needs to be immune to those things in order to, live in its environment. It is also immune to poisoned condition, the condition poisoned, and is immune to exhaustion. Now, this means that it literally doesn't need to sleep, as it cannot be exhausted, which makes it a tireless hunter, which is something I will go into later. It has 10 feet of tremor sense, which means that it can feel the movements in the ground around it out to a 10-foot radius, much like Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is a passive perception of 21, which allows it to basically sense anything that really tries to sneak by it. It can't speak, so it doesn't have any languages, and I set it at a challenge rating of 16. Now, here's why I might go into a bit of a rant, because I personally hate challenge rating. I don't like it at all. It is very messed up, very screwy, and not really balanced. So I put it at a challenge rating of 16, but in all honesty, you can make the challenge rating whatever you want. You can throw out challenge rating, because the thing is, if your party does a lot of single target damage, it'll do great against the Deathclaw. But if your party does a lot of small AoE damage, like, you could take out an army of goblins, but it's really hard to take on a thing like a single dragon, then you're gonna have a hard time against the Deathclaw. It is all based on your party's ability to do something about it, so as a DM, be responsible and use these kinds of creatures wisely. Finally, its proficiency bonus is a plus 5 because it is a CR 16 creature. Keep its proficiency bonus at a plus 5 even if you change its challenge rating, because unless you want to make your party suffer even more, then just keep it at a plus 5, trust me. Next up, we will move on to some of its features. Irradiated resistance gives the Deathclaw advantage on all saving throws against spells or other magical effects. It also means the Deathclaw is immune to being cursed or the effects of curses. Irradiated fortitude means that if damage reduces the Deathclaw to 0 hit points, it must make a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 5 plus half the damage taken, unless the damage is from a critical hit. On a success, the Deathclaw drops to 1 hit point instead. Hardened body means that when the Deathclaw is subjected to an effect that forces it to make a strength or constitution saving throw to take only half damage, it instead takes no damage if it succeeds on the saving throw and only half damage if it fails. Natural Hunter means that the Deathclaw has advantage on all wisdom perception and wisdom survival checks that use the sense of its smell. The Deathclaw also has advantage on all stealth checks if it is in an irradiated wasteland. The Deathclaw never forgets the scent of a creature and cannot be fooled by perfumes, colognes, etc. This also does include things like covering yourself in mud or other substances that may mask the smell. Natural Athlete means the Deathclaw has advantage on all athletics and acrobatics checks, and the Deathclaw's standing and running jump distances are tripled. Finally, Tireless means that the Deathclaw does not need sleep. It also can consume any water or food, no matter how impure. The radiation within itself is the thing that purges all the disease and other afflictions out of the food it consumes, the water it consumes, or anything like that. Next, we move on to, hilariously enough, the meat of the Deathclaw. Its actions. It has a multi-attack where it makes 2 claw attacks, 1 tail attack, and 1 bite attack. Its claw attack is a melee weapon attack that has a plus 12 to hit, a reach of 5 feet. It can only target 1 creature, and does 23 average damage or 4d6 plus 7 slashing damage on a hit. Also on a hit, the target creature must make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw or be grappled. If the Deathclaw hits the target with a critical hit, the target is automatically grappled. However, the Deathclaw makes 1 less claw attack for each creature grappled by this feature, meaning that if the Deathclaw happened to have 1 creature in each of its claws, then it would not be able to make more claw attacks. Next up, we have the tail, which is also a melee weapon attack with a plus 12 to hit, reach of 5 feet, and is single target. It does 27 damage, or 4d8 plus 7 bludgeoning damage on a hit. The target creature must make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw or be grappled. Also, once again, if it is a critical hit, it automatically grapples, and once again, like the claws, it'll make one less tail attack for each creature grappled. Bite is a melee weapon attack with a plus 12 to hit. It is a reach of 5 feet, one target, and does 28 or 3d12 plus 7 piercing damage on a hit. The target creature must make a DC 20 dexterity saving throw or be grappled. If the Deathclaw target hits the target with a critical hit, it's automatically grappled once again. The Deathclaw makes one less bite attack for each creature grappled by this feature. Next, we move on to the final action of the Deathclaw, Spinal Crush. The Deathclaw crushes any number of medium or smaller sized creatures it is grappling, dealing 29 or 2d20 plus 7 damage to the creatures based off of what appendage has grappled that creature. Creatures grappled with either claw or the tail take bludgeoning damage, and the creature grappled in the maw takes piercing damage. Creatures hit with this action must make a DC 20 Constitution saving throw or be paralyzed until the end of their next turn. Finally, we move on to the Deathclaw's bonus actions. It is a bonus action called Frenzy that says when the Deathclaw reaches less than or equal to half its maximum HP, it can use its Frenzy. Frenzy lasts for 10 minutes or the Deathclaw falls unconscious, basically meaning that it lasts for 10 minutes or until the Deathclaw falls unconscious. While Frenzy is active, the Deathclaw has resistance to all damage except Psychic and does an additional damage dice on all of its attacks, which is incredibly powerful, seeing as it essentially gains the resistance of a raging totem barbarian and does an extra damage dice with all of its attacks, including Spinal Crush. Now that I've gone over the Deathclaw's statistics, it is time to talk about some potential plot points. After all, this is Encounter of the Week, not just Monster of the Week, as that is something that the amazing content creator Dungeon Dad has been doing for a while now, where he basically just takes these older edition D&D monsters and makes them into 5th edition, and even creates his own homebrew monsters. He's really cool. Definitely be sure to go check him out. I'll link him in the comments because he is certainly one of the people that has inspired this series. The first way that I would run a Deathclaw is to perhaps have your characters maybe traveling through a desert. You don't have to make the desert itself irradiated, maybe just a specific portion, or even say that there's some sort of magical effect to it that acts like radiation, so it kind of fits into a more fantasy-based world. By doing this, you give an opening for a Deathclaw to be in the middle of this desert, whilst still not having to add too much to your campaign. I definitely suggest only running this against incredibly strong parties, and I don't suggest running this as the last thing that they encounter over a slog of a journey, as this is definitely something that could TPK a party of 4, seeing as it could potentially grapple 4 creatures and just continuously Spinal Crush lock them. Which means that you're definitely going to want to have a DMPC, extra NPCs, or just have a party that's fresh and ready to go, and ready to deal with a monster such as this. The second plot point I would suggest is maybe someone has captured a Deathclaw, either by taking an egg from a nest and having it grown up in captivity, or maybe having captured a sleeping one, or maybe one that was even awake and they just somehow managed to capture it. It doesn't really matter how it was captured, all that matters is that now it is somehow broken out of containment and your party is tasked with hunting it down. Maybe through the sewers, or in a circus perhaps, maybe they were trying to show it off as a circus animal. The people who captured it, that is. And so you have this wild goose chase where you're chasing this incredibly dangerous monster alongside a bunch of other people and just having a good old fun time. The final encounter that I would suggest is maybe having this monster be a bodyguard or accompaniment to a big bad evil guy, BBEG, whatever you want to call it, or some sort of other villain, as this thing would make for an incredibly dangerous pet. Maybe you have someone like your Adventure in Curse of Strahd have a Deathclaw captive, where Strahd is fighting your players and all of a sudden he pulls out a Deathclaw. Could you imagine the look of terror on their faces, seeing this behemoth alongside an incredibly strong vampire? I think it's funny just to think about, honestly. And honestly, it could work in really most situations, as the Deathclaw being a monstrosity means it can really fit into any circumstance and kind of work. It would be kind of hard to see maybe a god or a divine creature or maybe like a devil or demon using this, but anything else is really just free territory, so honestly, go wild. Now, as I said before, the link to the Deathclaw's sheet will be, of course, down in the description below. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of Encounter of the Week. I hope I gave you all enough to work with, some good advice on maybe how to run these creatures, and a detailed sheet to go along with it, a stat block, of course. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next edition of Encounter of the Week.